All right, welcome everyone. Bienvenue à tous et à toutes. Thank you again for joining us for today's event. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session on behalf of the Nashoons Project Consortium. And today is one of the many sessions that we're organizing as part of the Nashoons project that is, of course, part of the preparatory steps supporting the implementation of the EU mission A Soil Deal for Europe, 100 living labs and lighthouses to lead the transition towards healthy soils by 2030. This month and next, actually, we're still delivering, the Nations partners are delivering similar events in many countries, 43 member states and associated countries that we'll be delivering events in. Many of them have been hosted already over the past month and a half. And today we're very happy to be joined by you to deliver today's events for Luxembourg. And we're organizing a range of side events, of course, at different stages to facilitate networking within and across countries and between stakeholders in various land uses and professions to facilitate applications for the EU's Living Lab calls, which we'll be covering a little bit more as part of today's presentations. So today we have a fantastic program for you planned. So you will hear about, of course, the soil mission. We'll be covering what living labs and lighthouses are, how living labs can help achieve healthy soils, and we'll cover as well the key points of this year's living lab topics as part of the open calls. You will also hear from 3 great local experts that are joining us today to present the regional context. We have Dr. Gaëtan Fourbet, project manager at Luxembourg Environment Agency. We also have his colleague, Mr. Paul Tuck, project manager, also at the Luxembourg Environment Agency. And we have Dr. Kate Buckridge, senior research associate at the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. And really our aim today is that by the end of today's session, you will really see living labs as the way forward to lead the transition towards healthy soils, and so that you are inspired to co-create and participate in soil-focused living labs. So a few housekeeping items before we really get this event underway. First, we will be sharing the participants list with the names and institutions and email addresses with the participants only, just so that we can further facilitate networking following today's event. We will be taking perhaps some photos of the screen so that we can use in communication and dissemination materials for the Nashoons projects. And if you find yourself, if you do not want to be covered in any of the pictures, you can of course let us know. Either send us a note in the chat box, or you can also send us an email at info@nashoons.eu. So we may take this into consideration and remove you from any pictures. So if you have also given your consent during registration to receive updates from Nashoons and other initiatives as part of the EU soil mission, you always have the right, of course, to withdraw your consent. And you can also do so by emailing us at, again, info@nashoons.eu. And today's event is actually only an online event. It is not hybrid, of course. We will be all online, and the meeting will be recorded. One more note, if we have any francophone joining us today, there will be interpretation available that is easily accessible. You simply have to hit that interpretation button at the bottom of the screen and select the proper channel for Français. And you will choose a language, and then you have any problems with this, you can, of course, contact us through the chat box. And with that, I would like to now turn it over to our host for today's event, Stefano Pozzi-Muccelli, PhD, Head of European R&D and Innovation Support at Lux Innovation. So over to you, Stefano.
Thanks, many thanks, Isabel, and many thanks for all of you who are joining us for this webinar today. I'm covering today for my colleague Rebecca Damot, who is the national contact point for Cluster 6 in Horizon Europe, but also in the working group on the soil mission. Unfortunately, Rebecca was traveling back from a project meeting, and yes, flight cancellations happened, and she's still on her way back to Luxembourg. So I will be able to stay with you for part of this webinar. Unfortunately, I've other meetings planned for later. But still, it's a pleasure for me to be here and give some welcome remarks to this webinar. I work in Lux Innovation, where I'm heading the European RDI support team. We have a double function in this team. We are national contact points, and we are also delegated to the program committees. I just quickly explain to you what these two words mean, two titles mean. National contact point, it means that we are here to support all the applicants that are targeting Horizon Europe calls, including the calls related to the missions and the soil mission in particular for today. We are also delegates to the program committees, and the program committees are the fora where member states, together with, the Commission, together with the member states, are setting up the call for proposals, the work programs that you will find on the funding and tenders portal, where you can identify call topics that you can apply for. What's our role in these program committees? In these program committees, basically we exchange with the Commission and we represent the Luxembourg interest to this in the work program. So we are there to make sure that our keywords, the keywords that are important for your research and innovation, are present in the work program, so that you can have you can participate to these calls with your priorities. Therefore, it's important that you stay in touch with us, because we run regular consultation processes to make sure that we are bringing your priorities to Brussels. What does it mean instead to be a national contact point? Being a national contact point in Luxembourg in particular means that we are there to support you through the entire application process when you are targeting a Horizon Europe call. Since Luxembourg is a rather small country, and we have a team of 6 people in place to support you, we can do quite a substantial job with you. We start from your research priorities, from your research needs, and we discuss with you, we identify from what you tell us, where are the topics that that are fitting your research innovation priorities. We are there to map also all the policies that are behind these topics, because these topics are, all the topics are sitting on a number of policies that you have to explicitly reference in your project proposal. So we are there to tell you all the policies, all the preliminary work that has been done to reach the final call for proposal. We help you identifying partners. This is also in collaboration with other networks at European level, such as the Nations Network, how we can find your best partners for successful innovative projects. We have the full knowledge of all the databases of the past projects the Commission is using. So we are really able to help you in finding all these potential partners for your projects. We can review your proposals. We offer a service of proposal review. Of course, not always on the science, because I am a PhD, but I earned it 20 years ago almost. So it's my scientific knowledge is a bit gone now. But of course, we can help you on the horizontal aspects on the project, on the policy elements, on the implementation issues, and sometimes also on the science. It's something that sometimes we like to do. We help you with the administrative issues with the funding and tenders portal. So when you are preparing your proposal there, registering your PIC number, registering your organization, but also with the legal and financial elements. We organize training events. So if you go to horizoneurope.eu, you will find the future events that we are going to run in the next weeks and months. And if you are running a project, we are also there to help you in reporting, managing IP, and managing IP. So it's a full range of services that we offer. Feel free to contact us anytime. Feel free to contact us anytime, and we will organize a meeting and try to guide you through the towards a successful Horizon Europe proposal. I will just close with a number. Yesterday, Lux Innovation published its 2022 annual report, and you will see there that the amount of the financial return for Luxembourg has been in the first year close to 75 million euros. That's the figure for 2022. Until now, we have more than 100 million euros already attracted to Luxembourg thanks to Horizon Europe proposal. Our success rate is normally 3% better than the average at European level. We are now close to 20% success rate, and so I like to say when I'm discussing with our stakeholders that it's thanks to our job. I think it's also thanks to the great quality of the applications that are coming out of Luxembourg, out of the Luxembourg Research and Innovation ecosystem. So I hope that this webinar will encourage you to apply also to apply numerous to the mission soil. There's a lot of opportunities there for our community. I don't keep you any longer here. Again, my special thanks to the NL colleagues for organizing this webinar. And yes, I wish you a very successful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefano, for joining and for presenting and welcoming us today at today's event and helping us with the organization as well. Very much appreciated, and quite impressive the range of services that you offer. So we encourage everyone to take good advantage of that offer and be in touch with you and your colleagues. Wonderful. So I will now go into the next section of our presentation, and I now realize that I missed to introduce myself. So my name is Isabelle Kutcher. I'm a Senior International Project Manager with the European Network of Living Labs and all, which is one of the partners of the Nations project. And I'm happy to be presenting you today with some information about the soil mission and the thematics as well as part of the open calls that we'll be discussing later today. So with that, yes, so the first presentation aims to really give you an overview of the soil mission. The EU has launched a mission, a soil deal for Europe, to provide for the gradual creation of 100 living labs and lighthouses in Europe to again lead a transition towards healthy soils by 2030. And having 2030 as a timeline, the soil mission is a key stepping stone to achieving longer-term political targets set under the Green Deal, such as healthy status of all soils by 2050. We will get to the living labs and lighthouses in a short bit, but first, let's remind ourselves of the importance to promote healthy soils. Of course, healthy soils are crucial to life on Earth. Life on Earth depends on healthy soils, and soil is a basis of 95% of our food, not to forget all the resources and the timber that we harvest and use. Healthy soils provide essential ecosystem services such as clean water, habitats for diversity, and others. They are major carbon reservoirs that help slow climate change and make us more resilient to extreme climatic events. And healthy soils are crucial for all life-sustaining processes on Earth. Yet, soil is often taken for granted. Soil is a fragile, non-renewable resource that needs to be carefully managed and kept safe for future generations. Soil health is threatened globally because of a range of human activities, such as competition for land, intensive land use, production, consumption patterns, and anthropogenic climate change. In Europe alone, about 2/3 of the soils are considered unhealthy, and this does not even include an uncertain percentage of unhealthy soils due to the poorly quantified pollution issues. Degraded soils lose their capacity to act as carbon stores. They lose their capacity to filter and store contaminants, releasing pollutants that can end up in the groundwater or enter the food chain and pose a threat to food safety. The process of soil degradation can lead to a collapse of landscape and ecosystems, making societies more vulnerable to extreme weather events, food insecurities, and contamination and political instability. The total cost associated with soil degradation in the EU exceeds 50 billion euros per year. So these are some of the reasons why we really need to pay more attention to soils, and recognizing the importance of soils and the pressure soil functions are under. The EU made soils the focus of one of its 5 missions. EU missions are a new way to bring concrete solutions to great challenges, and the soil mission is created to lead a transition towards healthy soils by 2030. It is also at the heart of the EU Green Deal, which is a package of policy initiatives to overcome threats by climate change and environmental degradation. The aim, as a reminder, the aim of the European Green Deal is to provide, among others, fresh air, clean water, healthy soils and biodiversity, and healthy and affordable food. The soil mission includes 8 specific soil health objectives, which are shown here on this slide. So I'll go through them rather quickly, but we have number 1, reducing desertification. Number 2, conserving and increasing soil organic carbon stocks. Stopping soil sealing and increasing reuse of urban soils. Reducing soil pollution and enhancing restoration. Preventing erosion, improving soil structure to enhance soil biodiversity, reducing the EU global footprints on soils, and improving soil literacy in society. Living labs and lighthouses don't need to focus on all 8 of these objectives, but they are actually likely to address multiple inherently. So soil mission projects might cover several soil health challenges, themes, or mission objectives at the same time. And they might also even have living labs across different land uses working on those common challenges. And to give you a specific example from a, say, urban perspective, projects that could focus on increasing urban green areas through depaving and desealing would, for example, cover objectives number 3, the reuse of urban soils, number 6, soil structure and biodiversity, and 8, soil literacy. So it's important to think that all your focus of your living labs or of your cluster projects might focus on some objectives. They might actually be a bit broader and address some of the others. So the mission, again, is aiming for establishing 100 living labs and lighthouses across all land uses and throughout Europe. Living labs and lighthouses will accelerate the co-creation and uptake of solutions to meet specific objectives to tackle specific soil issues. And soil health can be improved in many places, and the mission does not distinguish between the type of land use. Instead, it addresses all the different land-based systems. And here we are talking about agriculture, forestry, urban, post-industrial. And the mission encourages a strong stakeholder and citizen engagement to accelerate the co-creation and uptake of solutions. Living labs boost the open science and interactive participatory innovation, a collaboration across professions and working places, is really following up a bottom-up approach where the end user is at the center of the innovation. And a successful mission requires co-implementation by land managers, region, businesses, researchers, policymakers, citizens, among others. In other words, the soil mission is cross-scale, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary, where a strong social science component fills knowledge gaps and develops solutions for soil health and for the continuous provision of ecosystem services. So the mission is made of 4 building blocks, each addressing a hurdle to overcome. So just going through this image here with you, in terms of number 1 for the research and innovation program, which builds a knowledge base for soil health and its support to ecosystem services to really overcome knowledge gaps and insufficient access to data and knowledge. with number 2, the living labs and lighthouses that are to accelerate the creation and uptake of solutions to soil threats, which addresses problems with adaptation of research results and technical solutions to local circumstances and land managers' needs. Going to number 3 for soil monitoring, a robust soil monitoring framework at the EU level and at the level of member states will track the progress of the soil mission objectives, which will amend a lack of capacities for monitoring and soil health. And the final block on soil literacy, communication, and citizen engagement, which addresses the insufficient awareness and know-how on soil health related matters. Here you can see on the slide how living labs are the core element of the mission and how they benefit from and will contribute to all operational objectives in the missions. Living labs and lighthouses add to the research and innovation program the knowledge, innovation, and research questions from practitioners responding to local needs. Living labs are also the platforms to test and adapt scientific knowledge, frameworks, and methods in real life settings. They also use a soil health monitoring framework to assess the impacts of innovations and other practices on soil health and ecosystems, and they contribute to the testing and validation of monitoring techniques and approaches. Finally, living labs and lighthouses are ideal places for citizen engagement and for activities and practices to improve awareness and knowledge of soils. So we will, of course, hear from our national experts about Luxembourg soil needs in a moment, but to introduce the similarities and differences, of course, of soil health across regions and across land uses, we did want to spend a little bit of time referencing another EU-funded project, the sister project almost of Nishuns, called Prep Soil, which started to look exactly in this, so in regional soil needs. One of the aims of Prep Soil is to identify the soil needs in 21 representative regions across Europe. The soil needs and these drivers of change are to be synthesized across the 21 regions, and they will include different land uses anywhere on the spectrum between agriculture, nature, forest, and urban industrial. So you see here on this triangle, we know that not everything will fall neatly within these categories, and there's many in-betweens. So we're keeping that in mind as part of the Prep Soil project as we're reviewing and synthesizing the soil needs. Prep Soil is still ongoing, so the results are not yet available, but in the meantime, there has been a comparable study within another project in the European Joint Program Soil to identify regional soil needs for the agricultural sector alone, which is shown here on this slide. So it shows a summary of a survey among researchers and stakeholders. And what you see is that some challenges are present in almost every country investigated, but similar soil needs across the region don't always necessarily mean that they share similar underlying problems, and that the differences in soil needs can be due to many reasons. For example, differences in soil types, climate, management, or political and social conditions. So this might be a resource that can be looked at for further information pertaining to this, and then more information will also come through the Prep Soil project. Okay, and with that, I will introduce our first national expert today, which is Dr. Gaëtan Fourvel from Luxembourg Environment Agency. So Gaëtan, over to you.
Okay, I will try to share my screen this time.
Looks good.
Okay, nice. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Gaëtan Fourvel from the Luxembourg Environment Agency, and I'm working on soil protection in the unit strategy and concept. And today I will show you some aspects in only 10 minutes about the threats and challenges for soils in Luxembourg. And I hope this will be just ideas to maybe try to identify a subject for our next future living lab. So as you know, soil provides different ecosystem services, but soils are not directly linked to those services because the soil is characterized by its properties. First, in orange is this flower chart. For example, soil organic carbon content, soil pH, or soil structure. And thanks to these soil properties, a soil is able or not to fulfill different natural functions. For instance, biomass functions, biomass production. And if a soil has a good properties, good chemical, physical, or biological properties, it is able to fulfill this function of biomass production. And when this biomass is used by human to provide food, fiber, wood, and so on, this function is used as a service for the people, for human. So as you can say, as you can see, soil properties, a soil is able to fulfill, to provide services, but through different natural functions. And as you also know, soil are under threat. It was already told, but in Europe, we identified 9 different threat degradation, and all those degradation can alter at least one soil property, but most of the time several soil properties. And those altered properties will impede soil from fulfilling its functions, and impeded functions will limit or prevent soil from providing ecosystem services. And in the end, we have degraded soils or unhealthy soil when a threat has altered at least one soil property. In Luxembourg, we are a little bit more lucky because 2 of those degradations are not significant thanks to our wet temperate climate. But the other one are or could be significant. Some of these degradation are significant, such as the land take, because Luxembourg has the 4th highest rate of land take in Europe, according to the European Environment Agency, and already a little bit more than 4% of the country are already sealed. So there is no debate. The land take is significant. For another category of degradation, such as soil organic carbon loss, it's not so simple because at national level, there is no clear trend of the soil organic carbon content evolution over the last decade. But ASTA show that locally we can have a significant decrease in soil organic carbon content, for instance, in some part of Essling. But this degradation is complicated to assess because it depends on many factors. And for other degradations, such as soil compaction or biodiversity loss or shift, we don't know yet if they are significant or not because we lack data over time. But even if we should tackle all those degradation to better protect soil in Luxembourg, I think we could focus in priority on the most serious ones. And to me, the seriousness of threat is a combination between the impact on soil, if the degradation will totally destroy the soil, or if it will only have a slight modification of the soil properties. And on the other end, the feasibility of remediation of the consequences of the degradation. Sometimes it's easy to recover, not most of the time. Sometimes it's feasible, but sometimes it's impossible. And to me, of course, it's subjective, but in Luxembourg, acidification and compaction could be the less serious threat because they have a limited impact on soil quality, in my opinion. And on the other hand, it is still feasible to remediate those degradation most of the time. But for instance, for the pollution and biodiversity loss or shift, I think it could be a little bit more complicated because the impact could be more important, and sometimes pollution and biodiversity loss is impossible to recover. So, in my opinion, those two degradation are more serious. For the organic carbon loss, I think it's somewhere in between because the impact can be very important on the soil quality because it can affect the chemical, physical, and biological properties at the same time. But on the other hand, it is most of the time still possible to recover the soil organic carbon lost. But to me, I think the most serious threat are the erosion and land take and soil sealing in Luxembourg, everywhere else, I think, but in Luxembourg it's the case because those two degradation lead to a real degradation of the soil, a loss of soil, even in some cases, a total destruction of soil. And on the other end, it's quite impossible to remediate those degradation. So if we should choose one or two threat to degradation to tackle, I think we should focus on the erosion and land take and soil sealing. But it could be nice to maybe to work on the to tackle soil organic carbon loss because if we protect soil from this degradation, we will automatically improve the fight against the compaction, biodiversity loss, and erosion. I think it's a win-win opportunity, so it could be more efficient. Unfortunately, we face different problems to tackle soil degradation. The first one is a physical problem. For me, to me, the complexity of soil is a problem because soil has a very important spatial and time variability. And this complexity is partially unknown. Just an example to illustrate this problem in urban area, for instance, we don't know anything about the soil quality and soil degradation in Luxembourg, at least quantitatively. Also, the soil is at the interface between various sectors, and this, I think, makes the soil protection more difficult because we have to deal with all the objectives and different use of soil. And the last one is the soil protection from the legislation point of view is not done yet, at least exhaustively, and at the national level and at the EU level, but maybe soon with the new proposal for soil health directive. But so to finish on a positive aspect, I think we can work to better protect soil, and I propose to work on to try to better quantify and locate soil properties, soil function, soil ecosystem services, and soil degradation, because we can solve a problem only if we know it, and we should work on agricultural soils, of course, forest soil, but also on urban soils. I think it's quite important to try to maximize the ecosystem services provided by soil in urban areas. We should try also to convince societies that soils are essential in all sectors, from citizens to different stakeholders. Maybe we should invest more resources, experts, money, time, and so on, because just from an economical point of view, a degraded soil costs more and produces less, so it's already a nonsense just for the economical point of view. And also the healthy soil is a real asset for people and the country, for the economical point of view, as I said, for the food security, but also for to try to mitigate the effect of the climate change. So, and the third point is to try to develop a more efficient cooperation between all organizations involved in the soil protection in Luxembourg. And that's why I accepted to be there today, because I think the Living Lab could be a good tool to do so. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Forvel. Wonderful. So with that, we'll go to our next speaker. We'll ask you to hold on to your questions, but please feel free to put them in the chat box if you have any questions for our speakers, and we'll have a Q&A in a short while. So you can either ask your questions then or put them in a chat box for us. So next I will invite, and I'll just maybe reshare my screen here just for the title slide, but we will welcome our next speaker. Here you go. Wonderful. So Mr. Paul Tuck, Project Manager at Luxembourg Environment Agency. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much. So I'm also going to show you a small presentation. So I'm taking over from my colleague Gaëtan, who talked a bit about all soil threats. My presentation will be focusing on soil pollution, even though it hasn't been selected as the most, let's say, impactful soil threat in Luxembourg. It is linked to many other aspects. Especially in Luxembourg, we have a great pressure on land, on soil, in terms of need for infrastructure, for building, housing, and so on. And if you want to avoid soil sealing, we need to redevelop already used land. And if we're dealing with used land, we often have to deal with pollution. So in that regard, it is due to the need to limit soil sealing, we need to deal with soil pollution. Also, because often enough, soil pollution can have a direct impact on human health through different pathways. It can be through oil exposure, inhalation, dermal exposure. It can be due to food uptake, drinking water, or inhaling fumes of volatile compounds. So there's a direct impact on human health, or can be at least. And also there's an indirect possibility on impact. You are already familiar with this little flower, and soil pollution can impact soil properties and thereby impact ecosystem services, which has not only an impact on human well-being, but also on health and a healthy life opportunity. So there are many ways that soil pollution can impact directly human health and human lives. Generally, if we talk about soil pollution, it is sensible to make the difference between a local soil pollution and diffuse pollution. With local soil pollution, usually the environmental context is a bit different. We have smaller areas with higher levels of pollution, where the direct impact on human health is usually prevails over the indirect impact. And apart from the, let's say, the environmental context, usually the legal context is very different, because we are dealing with either polluters who are directly responsible for pollution and need to remediate or to assess the situation, or sometimes if the polluter isn't at hand anymore, there's an owner of a land that has to deal with the situation. Whereas when we go over to diffuse soil pollution, which can be impacting large areas, can be global scale, usually with lower pollution levels and an indirect impact. We're talking about traffic. A good example is lead pollution due to the lead that was in fuels until the early 90s, which caused a global increase in lead concentration in soils. Other examples might be the use of pesticides or of fertilizers in different scales, which are, of course, generally accepted and legal, but still contribute to a large-scale slight pollution of our soils, which brings us to the more, that's legal aspect. It's more of a societal issue. So how are we dealing with potentially polluting agents? How are we allowing as a society them to be put on the market, to be used, and so on? So even though we're talking about soil pollution in the two cases, and not only the environmental aspects, but also the legal and contextual aspects are quite different, and therefore also the way we address the two types need to be adapted and different. There's also a time aspect. Something that's talked about a lot is the risk-based land management. So this is a quite good and useful approach when we're confronting mistakes that has been done in the past. So let's say if from the time where we didn't know better, let's say. So we need to confront these mistakes. We need to have an inventory of polluted sites, of potentially polluted sites. We need to know about background concentration, not only the natural background concentration, but also the anthropogenic background concentration. As mentioned, lead is a key example there. And we need to assess the situation and find useful, sensible solutions, not only from the economical point of view, but also from the environmental point of view. So we're talking about fit for use. We're not going to restore everything back to pristine state, but we need to make the land available for use to provide ecosystem services, let's say. In addition, we need to deal with the wrongdoers of the present. We need a due diligence for soil. It needs to be obvious that soil needs to be protected in the same way as water, air, and other aspects of the environment. The polluter pays principle already exists. It needs to be enforced in a correct way so that we can actually engage polluters to deal with the situation now. And if we want to do it in a sustainable way, the fit for use approach is not suitable anymore, because if we would deal with every new pollution with fit for use in the long run, it would lead to a further degradation of soil, and it would sort of accumulate the contaminated sites more and more, and it's definitely not a sustainable solution. So in that case, we need to restore as much as technically possible, so that we preserve as much as possible those qualities we have in soil. And then, of course, we need to avoid repeating the same mistakes. This is probably the most difficult part of it all. It goes beyond national legislation. We're talking European scale, at least. We in Europe, we have the REACH procedure to put chemical agents on the market. There's a European Chemical Agency, European Food Safety Agency, which need to be put in a place where they can avoid that agents are put on the market, substances are put on the market, are put in the environment legally, that later on will cause huge impacts on soil health, on environmental health in general. The initiatives are there. We're talking about Zero Pollution Initiative, the chemical strategy, and of course we also have a plant protection products regulation, which are useful tools in order to prevent future pollutions, diffuse pollution as well as local pollution. This brings me to what we need. It's a bit of a repetition of what I just said. So in European action on regulating chemicals needs to be there. We need to look at mixtures. We need to look at the real products that it's used in the environment, rather than just the let's say working substance, because the mixture is what makes the music in the environment and can change mobility and toxic effects hugely once it's out there. It is useful, it would be useful to have a European framework setting general principles. I'm still in favor of national a specific national legislation to cope with specificities in the legal existing framework, as well as environmental specificities, talking background concentration, but also the industrial history of member states may change. So there needs to be a national adaptation of the general principles that are set on European level. And then I'm repeating what the colleague Gaëtan already mentioned. Cooperation not only on national level, but also on European level is key to establish scientific baseline information. Soil is a complex subject. Chemical products are a complex subject. There should be an overarching cooperation on a European level to establish a solid baseline information system, because otherwise the risk-based land management will not work, because that one's only as good as the information that's behind it. And as I mentioned already, national monitoring is important to assess the situation, the local specificities, and then of course the national specific clear regulation on soil protection, management of soil pollution, and dealing with excavated soil, which is interlinked with many other issues in that subject. So basically opportunities, we have the initiative by the EU to put out a soil health law, which is much appreciated. And of course, we've got the Projet de loi relative au sol, which is out there has been out there for quite a while. To sum it up, we need information and cooperation. Cooperation is very useful to get to the information, because if everyone needs to gather information by himself, it will be a huge effort that is needed, and even in cooperation it will still be a huge effort, but much less than individually. This can lead to sensible regulation, and the most sensible regulation works best if there's a control behind. And with that note, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul. Very much appreciated your insight on these issues, and thank you for the great presentation. Perfect. And a reminder as well that we'll be providing the list of participants to everyone after today's event. So I maybe put Gaeta and Paul and Kate on the spot, but contact information will be available again as a reminder if there are any follow-up questions as well following the event. Wonderful. Okay, so let me share my screen again here, and we'll go to our last but certainly not least speaker, Dr. Keith Buckridge from the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. Over to you, Kate.
Okay, great. So first of all, thanks Dr. Linda and Isabel for inviting me. And also for everyone for coming out today. I'm looking forward to the engagement event where we can talk about a living lab in Luxembourg. So I'm going to present to you what I think are some of the challenges for managing soil organic carbon and soil biodiversity. Right, so the benefits to soil organic carbon, I think most of us know this, and the one that gets the most press these days is this ability to mitigate climate change, is using soils as potential atmospheric CO2 sink. But of course, also when we have increased soil organic carbon, it improves the structure of soils. And as Gaetan mentioned, it can reduce erosion, and this also reduces sedimentation to our streams and rivers, which leads to cleaner water. And also having more soil carbon means more soil organic matter in the soil, and that creates stronger terrestrial water retention. So that slows down the hydrological cycle. And means more water is available for plant growth, so greater productivity, and tends to also promote soil biodiversity. So this picture here is an image of the global carbon stocks in gigatons. So it looks like, as you can see, most of the carbon is stored in big stocks at the deep ocean or in the crust, but those are really turning over incredibly slowly. So is the permafrost carbon, whereas carbon in the surface ocean, soils and vegetation, and atmosphere are exchanging rapidly or relatively rapidly. Especially you can see that the carbon in soils and vegetation is 4 times as big almost as what's in the atmosphere. So this exchange means that we can, if we can somehow change the way that exchanges in managed systems especially, then we can have an opportunity to mitigate climate change by keeping more soils locked in soils and vegetation. And so that's what why this, even though it's quite a small number, this 18 or almost 18 gigatons of carbon in European agricultural soils becomes important. Next. So I think most of us know this, but the challenges to understanding soil carbon, some of this has already been talked about. The soils are really naturally variable. So the things that create different soil types, such as their slope, age, climate, the vegetation, their parent material, all those things create a lot of natural variability in the landscape. And that's also compounded by when we change land use within a soil type, for instance, or change management or interact with climate change, then that causes a lot of heterogeneity across the landscape, which makes it difficult to understand how soil carbon, to map soil carbon across the landscape. And then something that I'm quite excited about or interested in is how complex the soil carbon cycle is. And so if you could just do the animation, please. Thank you. Yeah, so there's these very complex mineral biological interactions in soil, which is partially summarized by this cartoon. The idea that the CO2 in the atmosphere is fixed through photosynthesis of vegetation or through autotrophic microbes, mostly through vegetation though. And that carbon then goes into producing biomass, which then dies and becomes litter material for decomposition. Or about 20% of that carbon goes through the root as roots exudates and just goes directly as sugars into the microbial community. And then the microbes break these carbon compounds down into very complex or simple compounds and use some of those to grow. And then the carbon products that they break down, plus the microbial biomass, the metabolites, and their necromass when they die, contributes to stable, or what we call entombed, persistent carbon, the long-term carbon in soil. And so, of course, while they're growing and dying, they're also releasing CO2. They're mostly heterotrophs like us, so they're breathing CO2, and that's being released back to the atmosphere. So this balance between carbon coming in through the vegetation and the microbes and being released through their respiration and being stabilized in mineral interactions is what creates the carbon balance. And that, all of those different stages all vary depending on soil type, vegetation, slope, land use, climate change, creating incredible complexity across the landscape, making it very difficult to understand where carbon's going to be a net sink into the soil or where it's going to be a net source. Added to that, there's this really large carbon pool or stocks that I mentioned, and very relatively small turnovers. So you have very slow changes, which require a very rigorous sampling method to understand when carbon is accumulating or being lost. So fortunately, we're very fortunate in Luxembourg that we have this nice soil carbon record. If you could skip to the next, please. Yeah, so actually, there's people here in our group that know much more about this than I do, because they're authors on this project. But so this is a collaboration between the University of Louvain and the Ministry of Agriculture in Luxembourg, so ASTA, and I've given you the link to that to see this report there. And what they did is they looked at soil carbon differences in Luxembourg. I mean, Gaëtan already mentioned this too, but between an earlier sampling in 2012 to 2015 and a later sampling from 2016 to 2019, they found no significant difference across the whole landscape, but very important regional changes with significant increases or gains or losses in soil carbon. And this is a very valuable record for future monitoring. It was a lot of work and rigorously sampled. And they also used a comparison of different types of agricultural management and found that this management, as well as clay content, as well as elevation, were important controls in soil carbon, and that some types of management had the potential to increase soil carbon, specifically including temporary grass and rotation, reducing tillage and adding cover crops. And so this is my opportunity. Sorry, could you go to the next slide, please? So yeah, so this is an opportunity then, if we can link to this idea of carbon farming to increase soil organic carbon, which is one of the call subjects actually for the Living Labs mission call, is this idea of carbon farming, the idea to increase soil organic carbon by management changes. And I've been talking about agricultural soil, but of course this is also relevant in managed forests, which are most of the forests in Luxembourg, and urban soils. So the idea being that you can increase soil carbon storage, and then if you monitor and report this, like that soil carbon report that was produced by ASTA, you could also then verify that and use that, for instance, in various different trading or subsidies to create a value of that carbon. And of course, I think this is not my specialty, but this is very big in the right now in the media. Lots of people are talking about different ways to do this. And so that's something I think that we need to learn a lot more about if it becomes an important aspect of valorizing the efforts of land managers to increase soil carbon storage. And of course, there's also lots of uncertainties because some of the mechanisms that we use to increase soil carbon storage have some costs. For instance, sometimes there's by using certain farming methods to increase soil carbon, you could have negative impacts on yield. Not always, sometimes they're positive, but this sometimes can change the financial costs for farmers, for instance. Or doing things to increase soil carbon and increase biodiversity can have also lead to increases in pest diseases or weed control costs for farmers. Another concept is that there is sometimes a trade-off between increasing soil carbon and increasing greenhouse gas emissions. So efforts to increase soil carbon can also lead to increased greenhouse gases. And this allows me to plug my recent project, which is on the next slide, please. So this is the project ADAPT that was funded by Luxembourg National Research Agency, the FNR, and also the MAVDR, the Ministry of Agriculture. It's in partnership with the University of Aberdeen and two farmers in Luxembourg. And the idea was to see how different management changes could that are meant to increase soil carbon may have a negative or positive effect on greenhouse gas emissions. And so we are looking at how cover crops and reduced tillage, and we also are mimicking drought, affect greenhouse gases, soil organic carbon cycling, and soil biodiversity. And this will be modeled to upscale to soil organic carbon and greenhouse gases, the national scale. And that's running, started in October, and it's going for 4 years. So that's just a little plug, but you can visit the QR code if you want to see more. And so I'm going to switch gears now. That's my intro to soil organic carbon challenges. And now I'm going to switch to soil biodiversity. So on the left here is an image of the soil food web. It's from the State of Knowledge of Soil Biodiversity by the FAO. And it's just gives you an idea of how potentially complex soil biodiversity can be. And that I would say our largest challenge is our lack of knowledge. So in Luxembourg, we've started to address this with a recent project between ASTA within the MAVDR and LIST to identify soil bacteria and fungi in Luxembourg croplands, grasslands, and forests. That's the link there. And we found enormous genetic and metabolic diversity. But of course, we were not looking at function, we're just identifying taxa. There was a small component of looking at function, but it takes a lot more work to look at all the functions that are in soils. There's multiple soil habitats, and these vary at microscales. So very small differences in soil pH, soil carbon, soil oxygen, water, nitrogen, and phosphorus, all the soil types. Also the soil community can have impacts on who's there and also what they're doing. So next slide, please. So I should have used the little flower that Paul and Gaetan were using because it's much nicer than this, but the idea is that soil biodiversity, like soil in general, influences many ecosystem services, that there's the relationship between soil biodiversity and soil structure is very strong, and they're influenced by drivers like environmental drivers like climate and land management, that they influence carbon and nutrient cycles and water cycles, as I mentioned already, those ecosystem processes, and that has impacts on the ecosystem services. The reason that this cycle is so similar to the soil cycle is the soil impact is that biodiversity is integral to soil and soil health. So basically soils and soil microbes and mesofauna are building soil together. So soil is being formed in part by soil biodiversity. Makes it very difficult to isolate, to quantify, or to apply value to the importance of soil biodiversity, which makes it very difficult to protect it. And so specifically, although we can identify taxa, and we're getting much better at that, especially with the use of high throughput sequencing, we still have very limited knowledge of the functional redundancy of the microbes that are there, or of the microfauna that are there. And we also don't know their resistance and the resilience to disturbances. And so if you go to the next slide, please. Just to explain that a little bit in case those aren't familiar terms. The idea of functional redundancy is that if you look here, this A is a fairly generic pathway or breakdown of cellulose. Sorry. So yeah, so there's a fairly simple breakdown of cellulose to methane. And on the on B, it shows you how the different steps or the breakdown steps like hydrolysis, fermentation, and metagenesis are carried out by not just one, but multiple different, those gray circles are multiple different microbes. And so those are, in theory, functionally redundant. And so therefore, if you take one away, if you reduce the biodiversity by even 9 times, you still have one microbe, for instance, that's still capable of carrying out that pathway. And so it means that this functional, we don't know the level of disturbance that we can get to before we remove that function altogether. So what this little, the C is showing though, is that the way that these microbes are not functionally redundant is perhaps within very fine variability in the environmental gradient. So the one on the left, for instance, has a flagella and is attacked by these blue phages, and it requires nitrate to grow, where the one on the right is has no flagella, so it's not motile, and it's attacked by purple phages. And the one in the middle needs ammonium, and it's working together to make biofilms. So these will each do better in different environments, but in certain, some ideal conditions, for instance, you wouldn't know that they're any different. So you think they're functionally redundant. So we don't understand which microbes are functionally redundant or when for most functions. Next, please. So the other concept that we are still learning or trying to figure out is this much even broader, this idea of resistance and resilience, the idea that a certain function or population, which is on the y-axis here, for example, respiration, microbial respiration following a dry wet disturbance. Over time, you can see that the resistance is this y-axis, how much this population or this function changes after a disturbance. So if this blue, I don't have my mouse power here, but this blue line, that when it dips down here, if it dips down less, it means that that's a more resistant population. And then the rate at which it recovers afterwards over time, how quickly it jumps back up to its original function, shows that it's resilience. And for most microbes and most functions, we don't know their resistance and resilience or their functional redundancy. Because we don't know this, as I mentioned before, it means we have a difficulty linking microbial biodiversity to their ecosystem services, which makes it very difficult to provide a value for loss or gain of biodiversity. So to me, this is one of the key things that we need to understand generally, but also in the Luxembourg context and associated with certain disturbances in Luxembourg that we think would be most likely. Okay, next, please. So in conclusion, I think soil health, soil organic carbon, and soil biodiversity, they're measured in very different ways, but they're all strongly interrelated. We know that soil health and soil organic carbon are positively correlated, and soil biodiversity is correlated typically with soil biomass and soil organic carbon. We know soil organic carbon is sensitive to land management, and soils can be used to mitigate climate change. So there's a good incentive for us to preserve soil organic carbon for just that reason alone, but for many other reasons. And then I think that soil biodiversity needs a lot more further description and mostly quantification for how it influences ecosystem services. And yeah, there's my contact information if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buckridge, for the presentation. And thank you, of course, everyone, to all our speakers for the excellent presentations. Together, you've provided a very good picture of the national context in Luxembourg, and actually many perspectives that could be applicable to other countries as well. So very interesting to be learning more through these presentations. So we have just a couple more shorter presentations here before we go to the Q&A portion of the event. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box in the meantime, and we'll get to them very soon. But in the meantime, I would like to invite my colleague, Belinda Cavallo, also from the European Network of Living Labs, to now present on soil health, living labs, and lighthouses. And I'll stop sharing here so that Belinda can take over. Over to you, Belinda.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much. So just a second. So can you see the slide correctly? Yeah.
Yes, looks good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. So thank you, our speakers, for providing the context, information, and the work on the way. Before moving to understand what the thematic focus of the 2023 Living Labs topic are, let's take a deeper look at what Living Labs and lighthouses are. So Soil Health Living Labs are collaborative initiatives to co-create knowledge and innovation. As we can see in the slides here, Soil Health Living Labs are defined as user-centered, place-based, and transdisciplinary research and innovation ecosystems, which involve land manager, scientists, and other relevant partners in systemic research and co-design, testing, and monitoring, and evaluating of solutions in real-life settings to improve their effectiveness for soil health and accelerate adoption. Lighthouses are defined as places of demonstration of solutions, training and communication that are exemplary in their performance in terms of soil health and improvement. So there are local sites like one farm, one forest exploitation, one industrial site, one urban city green area, etc. Soil Health Living Labs are place-based and are collaboration between multiple partners that operate at regional and sub-regional level and coordinate experiments on several sites within a regional or sub-regional area. As shown in the image on the left, lighthouses can be one of the many experimentation sites of the Living Lab, or they can be a valuable and high performance lighthouse that are positioned outside the Living Lab. The table on the right recaps this and compares and contrasts the scale, types of activities, and the performance in soil health improvement. An essential characteristic of the Living Lab methodology is the user-centric approach with the involvement of all relevant actors and end users. The specific actor will change depending on the focus, objective, and the context of the Living Lab. But all the actors can be classified according to the quadruple helix model, which is an extension of the typical public-private partnership. So the quadruple helix model involves representatives from all sectors of society. So the academia can, for example, be university or research and development centers. The public sector can be government or regional development agencies or policymakers, and as well as public sector in general. Industry can consist of business of all size and business cluster or associations. The fourth actor of the quadruple helix is the citizen and civil society, including all end users such as consumers and their associations. So these together form what we call public-private people partnership, the PPPP, that enables real co-creation and impact. The mission implementation plan defines a set of criteria for the selection and the setup of living labs in the context of the soil mission. The criteria are classified across four main living labs, four main areas of the living labs. So the aims, the activities, the participants, and the context. The aims refers to innovation, co-creation, contribution of societal challenges, improving soil health and related ecosystem services. The required activities include co-creation, co-development, experimentation, research on impact or networking and knowledge exchange, and demonstration, in particular concerning lighthouses. Living labs should include, concerning the participants, the public-private people partnership. So real soil managers has to be at the center of the innovation process. And finally, the context refers the inclusion of multidisciplines, methods, dimension, place-based approach, real-life context, and a robust scientific setup for ecosystem assessment. For lighthouses, in parallel, the criteria focus on exemplary performance and potential of inspiration within soil health and related ecosystem service. So now that we better understand what is a living lab, let's look at what at the benefits of living labs and why we should use the living lab approach. So living labs are indeed more and more recognized as an important tool to tackle societal problems. Living labs help address complex challenges that cannot be solved by single stakeholders in a structured approach. By involving citizens and end user from the very first moment, living labs not only support the rapid scale-up of innovation, but also help better achieve broad social acceptance. So living labs can indeed help overcome the lack of trust between stakeholders, finding a common ground among different actors with different approaches but similar goals, and evaluating, validating, and uptaking practical solution from users who are not easily reach out. It's not easy to reach out. So living labs focus on joint value co-creation, rapid prototyping, testing, and scale up of innovation and businesses. So we are talking of products and services. Within the open innovation ecosystems, living labs use iterative feedback processes for quick prototyping testing, so that processes and projects results can quickly enter the market. Cooperating in a living lab will help actors to become inspired, learn to think out of the box, better understand each other, accept different perspectives from different stakeholders while aiming at the same goal. Work together instead of side by side, quickly find solutions that have been through evaluating from different perspectives and therefore can be scaled more easily. So when setting up a living lab, the main components of the constellation need to be walked through different times with core stakeholders and the living lab team to agree on the initial strategy, as well as the operational and business plans. Many tools have been developed to facilitate this process and will be presented in detail in the Nashun capacity building webinars that we will also talk more later about. The living lab environment should have a good relation with and access to users willing to be involved in the innovation processes. Any living lab should also have access to multi-contextual environments, as well as high-end technology and infrastructure that can support both the process of user involvement and technology development and test. Each living lab environment also needs organization and methodology suitable for its specific circumstances. And finally, a living lab needs access to a diversity of expertise in terms of different partners that can contribute to the current activities. So equally important are the key principles of the approaches applied to the living lab activities. Following the soil mission, Nashuns consider 4 main types of soil health living labs. So the agricultural living labs, the urban living labs, the forestry, and the industrial living lab. Beyond our network, the Soil Mission Support Horizon 2020 project started a map of several soil initiatives, regardless of their level of readiness towards the mission criteria of Soil Health Living Lab. So this map that we see in this slide is now continue and expanded under the Prep Soil project. We invite you to take a look at the map and to use the form that is available on the page to submit any missing living lab or lighthouses that you may be aware of. We're going also to send maybe this link in the chat as well. So the next slides provide examples of successful living labs in various land use types. So here we have the precision agriculture for all, the first living lab in Serbia and one of the first in Europe to focus on precision agriculture. Next, we have OMKI, an agroecology-focused participatory experimentation network in Hungary that aims to promote agroecological transition. And then we have the Poland-based Krakow Technology Park, is the most complete one-stop shop for business operating in the country, and their portfolio of initiative includes several green projects. And then we have the Torino City Lab, is an initiative aimed at creating more accessible conditions for companies and other interested parties to respond to concrete needs in the territory, to the public administration and its citizens. Finally, Save Our Soil for Life is a demonstration project that aims to contribute to the implementation on a municipal scale of European guidelines on soil protection and urban regeneration. So now I leave the floor to Isabel to talk about the thematic focus calls.
Thank you so much, Delinda. So I promise we only have a couple more slides to go. We'll pause to take some questions. So let me just reshare my screen here shortly. Here you go. Okay, so last section of the presentations today for the thematic focus on the 2023 Living Lab topics as part of the calls. So later in 2023, 2 topics will open for proposals for funding under the funding living labs under the soil health, the soil mission. And we as Nashuns, a bit of a disclaimer, so we provide general information on the calls and the topics to reflect the information given by the European Union as well as possible. However, we do want to note that the sole official source of reference shall remain the 2023 mission work program that is officially published by the European Commission. So we always encourage you to refer back to that document. And on to the next slide here. Perfect. So Nashuns is supporting 2 topics of the 2023 open call called Research and Innovation and Other Actions to Support the Implementation of Mission, a Soil Deal for Europe. One of these topics is soil health number 0108, which is on co-creating solutions for soil health and living labs. And the topic 0109 is on soil carbon. The deadline for submission for applications within this particular work program for both topics is September 20th, 2023. At 17 o'clock or 5 p.m. Brussels time. It is to be noted that this submission is of the type single stage, meaning that the full proposal must be submitted at once by the deadline Submissions are to be submitted electronically via the funder and tenders portal. It's no longer customary to submit via paper, but we want to clarify that paper submissions are not possible at this time, so only electronically via the portal. Both topics are research and innovation actions, meaning that any actor is covered by 100% funding, and it is important to follow the multi-actor approach. So referring back to what Delinda was talking about when it came to the quadruple helix model, they really want to see a well-rounded consortium of different actors and involving a variety of stakeholders. And the application should include, it's very important that, yes, the application should include 4 to 5 or more living labs that address the same or several land use types in at least 3 different member states or associated countries. Each proposal might choose to work on several soil health challenges, theme, missions, objectives at the same time, but they might also have living labs across different land uses working on those common challenges, as we've mentioned before. So to look a little bit again back to the soil mission objectives and the 2 different topics, these 08 topic to support living labs that deal with urgent soil health challenges that contribute to the soil mission objectives 1 to 6 and 8. The indicative budget for this topic is 36 million euros, and it is expected that 3 projects will be funded. The carbon farming living labs are excluded from the 08 topic, since there is the focus of the 09 topic is on carbon farming. And the focus of the living lab under this topic should always remain on specific objective number 2. So conserving and increasing soil organic carbon stocks. The indicative budget for this topic is 12 million euros in funding, and it's expected that 1 application will be funded through this first round of this open call. So as previously mentioned, the mission revolves around collaboration across land use and regions. The calls really need you to work collaboratively to establish the living labs addressing soil health issues across scale, and to be interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary as well. Okay, so now we'll finally pause. We've been sharing a lot of information with you over the past while here, so we welcome your questions. I don't think I saw any in the chat box just yet, but let us review. And in the meantime, if anyone has any question, please feel free to raise your hand or to indicate that you have a question in the chat box, and we'll go over to you. We'll just pause here for a moment. Not seeing any questions just yet. And this is, if you have any questions as well for, of course, our expert speakers, not just for Delinda and I, but if you have any questions on any of the presentations, we welcome them. And you will have our contact information as well for future reference if, of course, anything comes up after today's event. We'll see here.
Can I ask a question? It's not so much a question, maybe more of an observation, because I came here, because you've kind of answered, I came to this session with the question of whether we should be making whether it's possible to make a living lab within Luxembourg that crosses many themes. And as you said, you can cross many themes, but it sounds like it should all be within one land use. And I guess my problem is that because Luxembourg's quite small, I was hoping that we could come up with some sort of soil objective that would be applicable to different sectors. So agriculture, forestry, urban soils, that would maybe have a common objective to, for instance, increasing soil health is too broad, or increasing soil carbon, but something like this, enhancing soil biodiversity, something like this that would go across sectors, because then we would have the benefit of increasing, just like many people like Gaetan called for in his talk, like increasing communication. Sorry, Paul also called for this, increasing communication between sectors. And because we all work within the same political framework, it allows us to maybe make a stronger impact within Luxembourg, as opposed to us saying we're a very small group. And so all the people who want to improve sustainable agriculture need to work with the other people in Germany or Belgium or France, for instance, in the greater region, to create a living lab, because we don't have enough of a force within Luxembourg alone. And that's, I think you've kind of answered me in the sense that it seems like we need to stick within our land use with it for one call. Is that true? Or can we have more than one land use? Because all the examples you gave were really very focused on one objective for one land use.
Yes, no, thank you. That's an excellent question. And on the examples that we provided, of course, there are no yet soil health living labs officially, since this is the first round of open calls that has been opened. So the examples, I should provide a bit of a disclaimer as well here, that the examples are provided, they are many of them are members of the European Network of Living Labs network. So they have already there are excellent showcases of living labs that follow a particular methodology that we follow at NL, but they are not official soil health living labs. We just wanted to provide some examples here. So in these cases, as you've mentioned, they would focus on one particular land use, although there might be some overlap within some of them. But to answer your question, it is clear that the calls that are open, the topics that we're currently presenting, that the applications for the 4 to 5 living labs or more that can be included as part of a cluster project, they are to address the same or different several land use types. So it's not limited to one land use types. It could be several. And what we've heard from the Soil Mission Secretariat is that they wanted to leave an open door for the different projects that can be put together to see what might be the best way to address a particular challenge or different objectives within the Soil Mission. So there's no constraints, how we understand it, to the amount or a limitation to the land use that must be covered as part of a living lab or an application.
Thank you.
Of course. Yes, Simone.
I think there is, yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead,
sorry.
please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the interesting presentations and interesting information. My name is Simon Marx, and I would first of all take the opportunity to introduce the Soil Department of the Ministry of Agriculture, and in the second time to ask a question associated to the project call. So first of all, we are several people here from ASTA. ASTA is the abbreviation of the Administration of Technical Services of the Agriculture. This is the agency of the Ministry of Agriculture. There are many departments about connected to agriculture, like the service of plant production, of everything that has to do with animals, and I'm representing the soil department. This department had been created in the 60s, in the last century, and one of his first mission was the soil survey. We still are working on the soil map, on this detailed soil map, where you already have seen a part of it in the presentation of Gaëtan Fourvel. we are also, even if we are in the Ministry of Agriculture, we are running a soil lab, mainly for agricultural soils, but not only, if there is a need, as it is the only lab in Luxembourg for soils. We also deal with urban or forest soils if there is a need of analytical questions. Our main domain is chemistry and physics, and from this year on we are starting a biological lab too, that will start in the summer. I just try to see if the camera is not working, huh? Or
It doesn't seem to be working for me, but we can hear you clearly though. So there you
yes,
are.
now it's
Perfect.
okay. Sorry. So, and our last domain in the department of the soil survey is also a quite new department of geostatistical mapping. So, for example, thematic maps like carbon maps on stocks, on pH, on texture, that you can see on the GeoPortail are also already published and had been prepared either in collaboration with universities like the example of Louvain for the carbon map, or also works with LIST, or here in Luxembourg on biological sequencing of DNA, or a more recent project with LISA about a suitability map for agriculture and horticulture. The main domains, as we are very intimately connected to the agricultural policy, and especially the new strategic plan that started this year, where two major threats are addressed in the cross-compliance. First of all, carbon, secondly, erosion, which are very intimately connected to agricultural activity, to management of agricultural soils. We have done already some previous work together with scientific institutions, with universities, on carbon maps, on stocks, on eventually management issues that could enhance the stocks. We have an erosion map, and these are the two main threats that we would like to address in the future too. So the idea of these living labs is, from my perspective, extremely interesting, even though at the moment, for me, it's not clear how it would work. And on that point, especially, I have one specific question what I did not understand. It's the point that there are more than one member states that must be part of the project. So did I understand that right? That, example, if we want to formulate a project as Luxembourg, we have to integrate, for example, countries here that we have that we commonly work together with, is like Belgium, Germany, or France. Is that how it is meant to work on the same subject, or?
Yes. So first on the subject, so there needs to be, of course, a focus to the application that would cover one or more of the soil mission objectives. So that can be, as I've mentioned before, it could be a really, really big focus on one or two objectives with perhaps touching on others as well, or it could simply be on many more. So depending on which side you're leaning towards. If it's on carbon farming, for example, then there's the call specific for this. Otherwise, it can be on the focus and be on the other objectives. So it's really open in terms of the topic of just the focus of your applications. When it comes to the makeup of the consortium for the project, these are cluster projects that have to be made out of 4 to 5 living labs or more. And the way I've understood it from Kate is that there's already work underway in creating a Luxembourg living lab, which would be one of these living labs to be part of the cluster project. So yes, the other living labs should be coming from other associated members or member states so that you can really have a broader coverage as part of your project. So the idea is really a collaboration between different entities that are outside of your national boundaries. So that's how you would be addressing this particular criterion of the calls. Does that answer your question?
Partly, just to re-ask what you just mentioned. If there is already, if there are already more concrete ideas, or I will reformulate the question. Is there already a more concrete idea to create a living lab in Luxembourg?
Can I answer that one, Simone?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Because, and Isabella, sorry. So I've had some nice conversations with Thorsten and Michelle about the potential for creating a living lab and addressing this call. We've not gotten very far. So we started having this conversation and got as far as saying, oh, what land use would we use? What objective? But we didn't decide anything. And one of the things I was excited about when Isabel and Dolinde contacted me is that it gave us the potential to reach out to more people, specifically to ASTA, to EAV, to like talk to different people and different stakeholders, because one of the key things for creating a living lab is that there has to be this co-creation and co-development and co-organization. So stakeholders from multiple levels have to be involved. So we can't just have research or ministries. We also have to have farmers groups or, I don't know, urban farmers or whoever, but people at all different levels have to be involved. Or perhaps like construction companies. It's important that everyone gets involved. And then because it's co-creation, there requires first a group of people who are excited to create an objective together. And so there's been no decision about what's going to happen. There's just been an interest in creating this type of discussion within Luxembourg. And then the question that you are asking about who should we partner with is a big one. How much do we make the focus about soil in Luxembourg and create a living lab within Luxembourg, and then take our living lab and partner with living labs elsewhere outside of Luxembourg? Or do we build our living lab across many countries, across many member states? So for instance, a regional living lab instead of just a Luxembourg living lab. And so because there's a living lab has 10 to 20 sites. So depending on what our objective is, it might be difficult to get 10 to 20 sites to build a living lab. If our objective is quite broad, it's easy, but if it's focused, then it's difficult. I think Gaetan is trying to, oh no, he's not saying something. He's just making hand gestures. Okay, does that answer what you were asking, Simone?
Yeah, when I can maybe add some information on practical experience on the two threats that concern the most in agriculture, it's organic carbon and erosion, because those two indicators are now formally integrated into cross-compliance. And the exchange that we had with farmers on both topics, they show that farmers are really interested to get help, technical help on how to improve, for example, organic carbon and how to avoid erosion. So from my perspective, living labs in agriculture, at least, with farms, with demonstration fields, with a participative approach where there is knowledge exchange between farmers, that is something very interesting, very important, and farmers are waiting for it. They are waiting for help based on scientific knowledge, on experiences, on solid data, on solid experience, and they are waiting for it. And we need it in the implementation of the cross compliance. So, I mean, at least at these both points, soil biodiversity is also something where what they are interested, but it's much more complicated. It's not yet ready at the practical level, but at least carbon and erosion, I think the practical answers are more likely to be found and transmitted to the farmers via, for example, a structure like that. And I think we also have one colleague of the school, of the agricultural school in our meeting. They have already experienced with a similar project, this kind of living labs on the fields with the project My Feet. And this is, from my point of view, an excellent way to transmit knowledge. Well, yes, that is what I wanted to share in this discussion.
Thank you very much. Well, maybe we can even continue this conversation in, since we'll be doing some breakout groups for more conversations, maybe we can keep this conversation going in the smaller groups with everyone. But I think we have maybe one more time for maybe one more question if anyone has any more, and otherwise we will go into the next phase of the event.
I just also want to say that in case you want to speak in French, feel free, because we have interpretation channel, as we said before, so you can just directly talk in French, and people can select French or English, and so they can listen either French or English.
That's a good reminder. Thanks, Delinda. And of course, if you have any, if you want to type your question in French as well in the chat box, you're welcome to do that. But if there are no other question for now, and of course, we'll remain available if there are any questions that come up after the fact. But one moment while I find my sharing screen button once again here. So what we would like to do next, since we've we've delivered a lot of information to you, and now it's time when we want to hear from you, and we've prepared a bit of an engagement portion to today's session, where we will be, if I can switch a slide, there you go. So for the next, 25-30 minutes or so, we will break everyone into two groups, and we'll be asking you to take some time in introducing yourselves in the chat box. Depending on the size of the groups, we might be able to do an introduction live rather than the chat box, and then to discuss some questions, which I will be presenting in a moment here. And then the idea is that at 3:15, we'll come back all together into the main room. We'll be doing a little bit of a reporting back and encouraging the groups to share 2 or 3 key takeaways, so interesting points that came out of your discussions. So do remember to select a maybe a note taker or someone responsible for providing that short overview when we come back all into the main group. And here is the list of questions that we have for you. And we'll be covering those in a Miro board. So you'll have access to that list again, but I want to show it on the screen here. So what we will do is that we'll encourage everyone to go to a Miro board. We will all be collaborating together to answer these different questions that are shown here. And so maybe I'll ask Delinda to maybe put the link to the Miro board, thank you, in the chat box. And then very shortly here, we'll be sending everyone to their breakout rooms, and then we'll reconvene around 3:15. So let me stop sharing my screen here. If you have any issues accessing the Miro board, Delinda and I will be each in a different room. So we'll be able to assist with any tech issues. And let me just get the rooms ready here in a moment. Wonderful. And with that, I will send us all to our different rooms. So we'll reconvene here again in about 30 minutes. So see you all again very soon. Welcome back, everyone. Let me just double check that we have most of our people back in the main room. I believe we do. Wonderful. So thank you so much for the great conversations. We had some good thoughts in my group. So now we have a little bit of time for some reporting back, just to share a couple takeaways of main thoughts or remaining questions that were shared in our groups. So Delinda, maybe I'll go to your group first and maybe ask you to, or anyone to share any thoughts.
So there is Paul who volunteered to be the note taker, so I leave the floor to him.
Yes, but I think I did a poor job, so my excuse is already up front. If somebody wants to intervene and add something at the end, please feel welcome. So I think should I go through the different questions? Just take them.
Yeah, like just the main points is.
I think in the main topics were of what to focus on, what type of soil use, land use, and I think the overall discussion was more on focusing on agricultural land, maybe grassland, whereas I personally feel that then we leave out new actors that are not as involved. So and we risk to not involve 2/3 of the area of the country. But of course, it might be more difficult to get those people around the table as they are maybe not as sensibilized to the subject. Basically, I have to look into the notepads. So yeah, soil organic carbon to investigate biodiversity should be investigated. So those were topics on grassland and prevent soil and water pollution due to manure application. So I think there's some concrete ideas that were already mentioned. There are also some suggestions to include, for example, the lycée agricole or the test fields already exist at ASTA for some living labs, which might be, of course, useful if we target agricultural soils. And then, of course, the great issue that's I mean, at least in my job, we talk about a lot is the overall vagueness of the concept of soil health and how to create, let's say, a focused objective within a still vague concept until, at least at the European level, it is, let's say, more clearly written out, which hopefully will be soon the case. Yeah, then there was mention of getting actors around the table and find a common goal. Of course, if we increase the diversity of the actors, then the common goal will be much more difficult to find, but on the other hand, might be more interesting and target more issues at the same time. That was just my overall take out of this discussion and of the post-its that were placed. I hope I covered most of what has been said.
I think maybe there is one raised hand.
Yes, I just want to add a little thing, something I forgot to write down, so it's not due to Paul's reporting. We also, well, I'm from the Lycée Technique Agricole, we also work for a few years now in a forest together with the ANF here in Luxembourg. So we also could help establish trials in this forest. I personally don't work on them, so I don't know what's possible and what's not possible, but we have both trials on agricultural land and a little bit in forest right now. So yeah, we are open to both, I would say, for the moment.
Thank you. And I think Simone has her hand raised as well.
Yes, I would just like to stress once more from the agricultural perspective, the priorities would be, as already presented by Gaëtan priorly, first land take, then either carbon or erosion and carbon. Maybe erosion would be more priority in the next time, and then carbon in combination with biodiversity. That would be our three major points that I think that we have to work on. Where on land take, I don't know if land take would be an objective where we could work with a lighthouse. I have not really a concrete idea how this could work. Whereas on erosion, on carbon, this is something at least at agricultural land, but maybe also carbon in forest areas or urban soils, this could be done in a lighthouse or living labs.
Thank you very much. And I'll quickly report back on behalf of my group. So there were some thoughts around the opportunities for Luxembourg. So being a smaller country, there was a discussion around that this is seen in a way as an advantage to organize ourselves around common objectives and join forces to address particular challenges. But of course, there remains different questions when it comes to looking at, for example, at setting up a living lab in Luxembourg, whether there might be a need to focus on a particular land use or tackle many of them at once, or which to having more conversations perhaps to decide on which objectives might be top of mind or most important that want to be tackled as part of this living lab. There were also, of course, some, which we've heard in other national engagement events as well, there were some questions around how to identify other living labs and stakeholders to engage in these cluster projects. So with that, actually, that's a really good segue to the last bit of today's presentation, where we do want to lay out the great portfolio of activities that we have available to you and to support you as potential applicants to the calls. So perhaps with that, and of course, if you have any other thoughts or questions, comments, you can add them still to the chat box, but I will reshare my screen here shortly since we're almost at time to conclude the event. Let me just see here. So I'll quickly go through the remaining bit and then we'll have maybe one last question for you, but let me do this and try to share my screen quickly. Okay, so going through this in a little bit of time. So of course, we do have several activities here that Nashoons as a project consortium has we have available to you in order to, again, support you towards the development of proposals to the calls. So here you have a list of different activities that we have ongoing or coming up. So of course, we have the engagement events as we did today. We will be doing more engagement events for the second round of calls as well in 2024. So more to come and in terms of engagement events in the future. In the meantime, we have a matchmaking tool that is available to everyone so that you can sign up online and find different stakeholders or living labs that work either on the same or different land uses as you are or on the same objectives. So there's already a good mass of actors that are subscribing to this portal or this platform so that you may connect and schedule one-on-one meetings or group meetings so that you may discuss opportunities, of course, and creating a consortium or a cluster project for the calls. On the website, very shortly, we will have some fact sheets that will be available describing in a little bit more detail the process to create a living lab. We also have land use specific fact sheets that are being developed and will be added to our Nishoon's website. We are developing a help desk and a list of frequently asked questions. So we thank you again for all your questions today, since we're absolutely taking these back with us so that we can contribute to our list of FAQ, which will be published on the website very soon. And the help desk will be soon up and running so that you can send us more of your questions as you're thinking through the process. We have a lot of webinars that are coming up. Some of them will be on the Living Lab methodology, where we'll be looking at the basics of setting up a living labs and different how to set up, develop, and enlarge a living lab. We also have some thematic events and webinars that will be on different themes for specific land uses to bring people again together and make opportunities for connections. We have coaching as well available, which I'll speak to in a moment. And I think I covered almost everything on the list here. And but again, as always, make sure to stay connected with us so that you can hear about the latest information on these activities. Okay, so more specifically, so I've already spoken about the matchmaking platform that is available online. If you go to our website, nishoons.eu, you will be able to see the matchmaking tool link on there so that you can go on and register. So strongly encourage you to do that. For the coaching sessions, we are in conversations with some potential mentors. We're still looking to confirm a mentor for Luxembourg. So if you perhaps know of anyone who would be a good mentor and would be available to provide guidance in the Luxembourg context, please get in touch with us. But we're really hoping to have a mentor confirmed for Luxembourg very soon. So more information, and we do have a page on our website as well about this that is being developed. So you will have access to all the country mentors, including for Luxembourg, hopefully very soon. And I've already mentioned the webinars and thematic events that are coming up. So yes, stay tuned and subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on social media, and to get the latest news. So let me just check the time. We're at time. So I will just finish by saying a big thank you to our host, Lux Innovation, and its representative, Stefano Pozzi-Mucelli, and our speakers, of course, Dr. Fourvel, Mr. Paul Tuck, and Dr. Buckridge for their presentations and sharing their time with us. And of course, to all of you for joining today's event. So yes, again, connect with us via the website, subscribe to the newsletter, contact us if you have any further questions. We'll remain available, and expect an email from us very soon to reshare some of these resources with you, so you have everything at your fingertips. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you a good rest of your day, and we look forward to connecting again in the future.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you to Lyndon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.